Hello, world. Louisville, Kentucky, the rest of the United States. What is going on
I
today? My name is Henry
know.
Lucas.
And
Welcome
I am
to
Sharita Walden. Oh, there you go. And I'm Sharita Walden. It was a little lag there. There you go, Henry. Boy, I love our intro, Henry. Oh my
that
gosh.
was really good. Shout out to Ryan Jones for putting that together. Yeah. It's
Woohoo. And I love that we are on other platforms. We are now on YouTube. I am so happy about that. So we are not just streaming on Facebook right now, but we are actually streaming on two different platforms. So you guys, please go ahead and click the link, like and share as we get started today and get some folks in the room. This is so exciting. I'm truly excited, Henry.
Me too. And don't forget to subscribe. And also, if you're feeling generous, go over to our website. Kentucky Harm Reduction Coalition is a nonprofit. We are defeating stigma and we're bringing harm reduction into all the spaces. And so, if you're feeling generous, hop over to our website, kyhrc.org, and donate, please.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I was just sharing on my page, Henry. I know you are not on Facebook right now, so I'm sharing on Facebook because we are doing a follow up from our last chat, and boy, was that sparked some energy having our guest on 2 weeks
Yeah.
ago. Oh my goodness, we are getting
This
started.
is a good opportunity too to our audience, right? If they have a request, or if you want to see a guest, or if you have an incredible story of harm reduction has somehow impacted your life, your journey, please reach out to us, and we would love to have a conversation about welcoming you or somebody else that you would recommend on the show.
Yes, yes. So today.
Yeah, what we got today?
So today we 2 weeks ago we had our before we get started, we do want to
Yes,
share.
tell them.
We got a live show coming up, you guys, in person with Henry and I, May 10th. We will be having a live podcast, a live by any means. So you get to meet us personally. If you're in town for the weekend, celebrating family, or just coming in town, sign up and join us. It's free. It's free. We just want you to sign up so that we can make sure we have a nice head count of how many people are going to be in our space, and the amount of snacks we want to have for you guys as we have a great in-person conversation. And those seats are filling up, actually, you guys. So we look forward to having you in the space, but we did not want to forget that we got this live recording coming. It is going to be on fire.
If you like what you hear from our regular podcast and just the honest, real, unapologetically authentic conversations that we have, you are going to want to be there in person for this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now that we've shared everything, today's title of our show up, shut up, stay rooted when solidarity isn't about you. Now, this is our follow up. Traditionally, when we are in clinical spaces, we like to debrief and we like to come together and talk about how a session has gone, how a training has gone, and reflect on it. So, a cool idea that we came up with was to do that with our audience because everyone wants to know how do you all connect? How do you really do it? Well, part of it is after we have such a large meal. That's what I call that meeting. That session we had 2 weeks ago was large. It was a lot to unpack, and we only have a little time. An hour and a half may feel like a lot of time, but it really isn't a lot of time when you think about all the things we talk about. So, after such an inspiring and deep conversation we had, we wanted to take a deeper dive, right, into the uncomfortable. All right, so it's gonna get uncomfortable. We're gonna have an uncomfortable. You're gonna see live and streaming how these conversations go with Henry and I. What it really means to show up for communities you do not belong to, without expecting applause. right?
Yeah.
Which something, Henry. There we are.
Yeah. You talk about it being a meal. I'm still digesting that.
Yes, it was exciting, but it was actually it was just a real very good look at the work that we do and the engagement that we have with our communities. And sometimes when you feel like, man, I'm showing up, I'm an ally, and you start listening to people talk, and you start going, "Ooh, I didn't consider that.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute, I was thinking about it from my lens." Um, it really helps me sit with it is a little uncomfortable, if I have to admit, for myself. It jumps right into this first question I wanted to unpack with you.
Yeah. I want to add something real quick
Go
though.
ahead.
I saw the title, and it's "Show Up and Shut Up." And from my lens, and what I've learned about me is it's not about shutting up.
Mm,
It's
okay.
really about showing up and holding space.
Mm,
And holding space for me might be that I'm not talking, but it doesn't mean that I'm shut up or that I'm shut down. And that
mm,
holding space is actually it's a very active and involved role in the process whenever we're with someone else, listening to their stories or listening to what they're going through, or listening to whatever it is that they're talking about. And active listening is a part of that. So it's
mm,
not always about shutting up, but it is if I know that I'm uncomfortable and I have something that I want to say. It's usually best for me to not immediately say it and to sit with it, because if it's
mm,
true now, then that means it'll be true later. It'll be true tomorrow. It'll be true, next week. And honestly, sometimes I like to speak because I love to hear myself talk. And that's what we're trying to get to, this place of like selflessly holding space and being with people so that we can really let healing, or that we can really let something magical and miraculous happen. So I just want to.
mm. Yeah, I like how you said that, but there was a something you said. You said it's not when we say, and maybe the way that I was thinking of it is what you said. If I'm a shut up, it doesn't mean shut down.
Yeah.
I love that. It doesn't mean, because shut up is hard. So it's on it feels harsh when you tell somebody shut up. Like it can be harsh. It doesn't mean shut down. And I know for me, the way that it resonated with me, it didn't hit me in a way that I became upset. It was like, okay, Sharita, yeah, you need to shut up. Like that's a way that I can talk to myself. And I have told myself I need to, because I'm a talker. So I like that. Shut up or don't shut down. When you said that, I was like,
Yeah, don't shut
I feel
down.
good.
Still stay in it. Still be involved, and I think that's
Yeah.
important when we have these tough conversations, when we are feeling uncomfortable and we're overwhelmed. It's
Mm,
it's it's not consciously happening, but what comes online, and this is a lot of what we avoid when we don't have tough conversations with the people in our lives, and we
hmm
shut down because our nervous system gets so overwhelmed, and we will literally unplug without even realizing, that's what's happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Stay with it. When you're having tough conversations, stay with it. It ain't about you, anyways.
It's really not. And that's that's a reminder. I think sometimes we have privilege in as clinicians, because we know that we train to understand that, embrace that. But it's something that a lot of people, I think that's part of the piece that we're missing. Um, and it's a good segue into talking about doing the right thing. What does that really look like? What does doing the right thing look like when nobody sees it and nobody thanks you for it? Because when we say shut up, this is part of that. Like, how do I show up and do the right thing?
Well, what's the right thing too? What's right for me may not be right for you.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm
Mm,
doing the right thing, well, what is the right thing? Well, that comes from our values,
mm-hmm.
right? That comes from my moral code. But me and you may
Mm-hmm.
not have the same values. We may not have the same morals. So we do the right thing then?
Mm. And I guess it's examining where it's coming from. I guess it's an examination of where is the desire to do a thing coming from. And I guess for me, it makes me reflect on the thought process of it. Okay, am I doing something because I want to be a good ally? So I have to really take a step in that. And I have a situation where it happened. I was working in a program and I wanted I wanted to show up for a community member. And I was like, you know what, for this community member, we're going to make sure that they have access to the bathroom the way that it's supposed to be. They're going to use this one bathroom and we're going to put them in this one room away from everybody else. And I remember as I was talking, I remember becoming really uncomfortable. And I said, oh, wait. What am I doing wrong here? Now, for me, it was a right or wrong because I was recalling. I think, Henry, when I look at that situation, I think it was because everybody was quiet while I was talking, and I had to go, "Uh oh, it's too quiet. It's too quiet. I'm lost in my dream right now." And what I realized is, oh, I'm talking about a community that I don't belong to, and I'm coming up with the solutions within this community that I don't belong to. And I didn't talk to not one person that was a part of that community.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Well, let me ask you this, right? When you do something wrong, right, or you say something wrong,
Mm.
how do you usually feel about yourself?
I have a sense of guilt that starts to resonate. It starts to bubble up.
Yeah, yeah. But what if this whole thing isn't even about getting feeling right? Because it's like I'm either going to make a choice and I'm not going to feel guilt, or I'm going to make a choice, I'm going to feel guilt. But oftentimes, people with more privilege, they're going to
Mm.
feel guilt either way.
Mm.
And feeling that guilt or feeling that responsibility, right? Or feeling that remorse. And there's a term, for white guilt, right?
Mm.
And I see it. And ultimately, we peel the layers of race and gender and stuff back. What we're really looking at is a level of codependency and people pleasing,
Mm.
right? People pleasing. And what I know is, people that I'm different than and people that are, different from me, like they don't need me to feel guilt in making the right decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that does nothing but continue to compound the issues that are underneath of the surface anyway. Because what we're what we're trying to get to is we're trying to break through our biases and we're trying to break through our judgments and we're trying to break through our ignorance and sometimes we're trying to break through our stupidity, right?
Mm.
And it's ultimately it's love that we're trying to get to, like love, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going to heal all things. That's what's going to make things in harm reduction right. That's what's going to make things in recovery in our state in our world right, is ultimately going to be love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so a reframe that I have isn't, what does doing the right thing mean, but maybe a better um, way of assessing if I'm doing good is what's the best thing that I can do,
Mm.
because it takes the guilt out of it.
Yes.
Because as a white man that checks all the boxes for privilege, like I still can feel guilt. And it's not your responsibility to like rid me of that. But if I
Right.
have to choose between like right or wrong, it's a fine line between still feeling bad about, the myself, which is really the thoughts and the judgments and the feelings that I have in our social conditioning. So maybe the question I could ask myself that's different to maybe get a better result or about a better outcome. What's the best thing that I could do? What's the best thing that I can say?
Mm. I wonder, and please, if you are watching this, we would love to hear what resonates and what comes up for you as we unpack this. Um, it's not a normal conversation that a lot of people have, and we get that. So what resonates with you as you hear this way of reframing how we think of things, and it really sitting with you're going to feel some guilt regardless. I think that's permission for people to show up, honestly, Henry, and it gives people permission. I think the idea is that people feel like they're not going to at all, and we will.
One of the things that I love about our relationship is like, yeah, like we can be open and we feel safe with each other, and we have a lot of, goofy and serious and innovative, conversations. But one of the things I really appreciate about you, Shrita, is um, I've you've never made me feel bad about feeling bad,
Mm-hmm.
right? And going back to holding space, right? I'm so grateful that over the years that you've really have really held space for me to be with my feelings
Mm-hmm.
about race and gender and harm reduction and abstinence and recovery, like all the things, right, that we talk about over the years. It's really what happened though. It's really allowed me in my own time to challenge those biases or to challenge those judgments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I feel I'm getting criticized or if I feel threatened or if I feel like I'm getting attacked from someone, that doesn't give me a whole lot of opportunity and willingness to really check in with myself. It's like I'll clam up,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not helpful for me, and that's certainly not helpful for the people in my life.
Right. Right. I think and as you're sharing the experience with me, and as because oftentimes I don't really know that that's happening, right? And people will ask, well, how can you show up like this? And you still are very strong and passionate, especially about white people in.
I think we're having technical difficulties. I think your volume went out.
Hello.
Yep, there we go.
There we go. Uh-oh, Ryan better get in here. But I think about the spaces that I have been able to learn about concepts, or for instance, I think I said white fragility. And I think what I've seen and observed people do is they take this information in and then they don't know how to navigate. Like it's like almost I understand now I need to change you because your fragility is showing up. And for me it's like, well,
Your volume keeps going out. Um, it's going out. Maybe just disconnect that. Yeah, maybe use your other audio. Well, while we're getting that figured out, I'll share a little bit. I really liked where Shrita was going with that. it's easy to feel bad when we don't understand fully, and it's just as easy to judge and voice those judgments and to make other people feel bad. And this whole thing about reconciliation, this whole thing about recovering and growing as individuals and as communities, it doesn't happen when we're in a place of being criticized. It doesn't. And they did a study in Japan a few years back. And in this study, they had two groups of plants. And one group of plants were over here, and the other group of plants were over here. And it was outside of this office building. So every day that people walked by these two groups of plants, they stopped by this group of plants and they said things like, I hate you. And they said things like, you're ugly and you're awful. And they walked by this group of plants and they said things like, you're beautiful, I love you, keep growing, you can do this. And what they found over time, the plants actually that were said horrible things, bad things, negative things, those plants actually started to die. And the plants that were told, we love you, you can do this, keep growing, those plants actually thrived more than plants just sort of in their natural environment, with sun and with water. So we're all in our own way, we're all dealing with so much anyways. And I always say, you can't make me feel any worse than I already feel about myself in some of these things. And I think it's easy to scapegoat our feelings by sharing these judgments and gossiping and criticizing. I think for most people, it is more difficult. It's harder to say more vulnerable things like, I appreciate you, I feel you, thank you for sharing. I never thought about seeing it, that way. Thank you for being my teacher. Thank you for showing me a different perspective. I think that's more difficult for most people, because it's vulnerable, and vulnerability feels unsafe. And so that's ultimately, when we have these conversations, that's really what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid the vulnerability. And so we'll shut up and we'll shut down. And the whole outcome is with this is to stay present. Most people aren't present with the people that are in their lives, regardless of of where you're at. And part of that is we're naturally self-absorbed and self-consumed. We have our own agenda, and we're generally, I know for me, I'm waiting for my moment, to talk. I'm waiting for my moment to, insert myself. And so if I'm, having a conversation with someone, really the rule of thumb is 75% of the conversation needs to be me listening, holding space, and asking questions, especially if I'm wanting to get to know someone, especially if I'm really striving to understand. So it's hard work, but what happens over time, the more we get into it, and that's why, I can stay with it with Sharita, is I've actually built up the tolerance to be able to have difficult, uncomfortable conversations. So that's what they mean when they say, let's get comfortable getting uncomfortable. Let's build up that tolerance so that we can stay in these conversations and stay with people, really long enough to receive the gift. Because psychologically, we're all really just, and I've shared this before, we're all mirrors, and we're all reflecting back to each other, generally things that we can't see in ourselves. And so each person that we encounter, each person that we interact with on a daily basis is truly a gift. Welcome back.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
The universe didn't want us to have this conversation today, but we made it happen.
We did, yes. We've got good support.
Yes, thank you, Ryan, again for supporting this. But go ahead and bring me back up to date, Henry.
I was just sharing, hopefully, some things that were helpful to folks about holding space and projections and judgments, and like the importance of asking questions and listening versus looking for the opportunity to jump in and to talk,
Okay.
right? Because it's really easy for me to make the conversations about me. And I'm starting to feel like that now that you left and you came back and I've been talking for a few minutes. So,
Well, I mean, as we were having this conversation, and I hope I don't repeat things that Henry shared, but I can add into so making it about us. Is there a such thing, Henry, as a selfless act though in the work that we do? Is there a such thing as being completely selfless? Like, really? Are we really being selfless?
well, no, and I don't think it's inherently wrong. I'll say that this time or bad, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's really about knowing where I'm at. Like my cup gets full by filling up other people, in order to keep it, you have to give it away. So
Mm-hmm.
what we're talking about is there has to be a match of energy and the reciprocity, it has to be equal.
Mm-hmm.
Or it ends up being a give and take relationship. And what we're trying to do is really learn how to dance with each other, really learn how to hold each other and all that we represent whenever we're getting together to, talk about some of these difficult conversations. So you lead and I lead and you sway and I sway. And we're really just going to the beat of life, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Yeah, and I'm glad that you said that because again, I mean, we can try very hard to say, "Oh, it's nothing. This has nothing to do with me." Or like someone said when I ran for office, I kept saying it's not personal, and a friend of mine said, "Well, actually, stop saying that. It is personal. Why are you even doing this?" And I was like, "Oh, I guess that's right." But it felt a little uncomfortable. I gotta be honest, it felt uncomfortable actually saying this is personal.
What was uncomfortable about that, though?
I think for me, as I think about what's uncomfortable when I say I was running for office, which is very much about community. And when I hear personal, I gotta say, I do think I become defensive if someone says you're taking this personal. And maybe the defense, honestly, if I'm really transparent, is probably because there's truth in that. That's truthful. But why do I feel so uncomfortable with that? Is probably something I'm still trying to work through because the reason why I'm speaking out or doing anything in my community is because it's impacting me personally at some point. I guess because we've changed things being personal and made that a negative. It feels, aha, I think I figured it out as I'm talking about it. It reminds me of what I feel and a person with privilege and an oppressive approach would be is that it's about them. So when I hear that, it's like, I don't want to be that. I'm not that because I've created it's personal, it's about you to be a negative experience or a negative thing.
Yeah. What's easy to
Ugh.
feel like it's easy to feel attacked,
Mm.
especially when we're vulnerable, right? You think about vulnerable, like it's like doing things that haven't been done, right? Doing things like with that, taking that armor off. It's
Mm.
easy. It's easy to, I always say in my position, like people are shooting arrows at me. And I'm not
Mm.
saying that I'm some savior, I'm some knight or something, but I know that based off right now, and when someone's watching me talk, like they're probably having some sort of judgment about me.
Mm.
And our mind can't help it, right? And if I'm in a conversation with you, there's all sorts of ways for me to get hooked.
Mm.
And so holding space is really about being present without interfering in the process.
Mm.
It's like looking up at the sky and seeing the clouds. Instead of reaching up to grab the clouds, I just noticed that the clouds are passing by. And if I can have that mentality in life, I will very often not take things personal because
Mm,
it's not about me. What you think about me is not about me. It is about you. And my job isn't to change your mind about me.
mm.
My job is to show up in how I was created and to continue to learn and to strive to do better.
So, yes, yes, I love that too. Sarah, being present is about holding space without interfering in the process. I was really wiggling in my chair. I guess another thing that comes up for me is this like both sides of the coin. When I think of how I feel defensive when it's personal or really owning that there is me inside of these fights, there's me inside of the community. It's trying to hold space and not disappear at the same time. It's like how do we center the need and the experience of the people we're working with without erasing. So I think the battle inside of me is that it is true, but I need to still show up as a person who is an ally, is a supporter. But I'm also now grappling with how do I do that without losing myself and losing how I exist in this too, because I'm also marginalized in all these different ways. So, ooh, because as I'm sitting here, I'm like, yeah, I can see all of these things are true at the same time. They're coexisting.
You remind me of something my wife says that redirects me, and there'll be some crisis going on at our house, and one of our kids is crying, and something happened, and she's in there consoling the kid, and they're all in it together, and I come in there like, yo, have you seen the toenail clippers? And she'll look at me and she'll say, read the room, Henry. Right. And I was like, okay, yeah. Well, I can wait, or I can go look for them. But why? How come the toenail clippers ain't always in the same place every day? Right. That's like my thought. But I think
Mm,
your question, and I'm using a bit of humor, but I think that part of answering that question for you is we have to get really good at reading a room.
mm, mm,
Because if this whole thing is about community, and if the whole thing is about us being whole and together, and regardless of who I am and what I may represent for people, if I am not there, or if I'm not represented, if I'm erased, then it's still not a full whole community.
mm,
Right. And reading the room oftentimes means observing to see what's happening and what needs to happen.
mhm, mm. Have you ever experienced a time where you stepped back and it felt like you lost your own voice? Have you personally?
Yeah, yeah. During the 10-year anniversary, I've noticed that over the course of that
Oh,
weekend.
wow. What came up? Share that. Share
Yeah.
that thought.
So I make space naturally for people, right, to step
Mm,
in, and sometimes making space means I'll martyr myself.
mm,
I'll take my own voice because it's about you. It's about everybody else, and then I'm looking around and saying, well, why am I alone?
mm,
Creating space for people to speak up so much, so often, leaves no room for my voice at times, right?
Mm.
And I'll discount. Well, it's not a big deal, well, you do stuff all the time, well. And so then it's very easy for me to start criticizing, myself. I'm not doing it right. Who do I
Mm.
think who do I think I am? Oh, you speak up, they really gonna see your privilege. You don't want them to see you in your whiteness and all of your
Ooh.
privilege. Don't let them see that. And so internally, folks would know, except those closest to me, but there's a lot that's happening that I'm getting hooked by, internally, right? And I think that's like not just like I'm holding myself accountable, like, hey, I'd like to share something, I want to speak up, but I think it's also our responsibility not to caretake other people, but it's our
Mm.
responsibility to check in. Hey, where you at? I noticed you've been silent this weekend. You got anything you want to say? How you think things are going? And not saying like that totally happened, that weekend, right?
Mhm.
But it's just as important for other people to check in with me and for me to check in with other
Yeah.
people as it is for me to check in with myself, especially the people I know that are going to push me and challenge me and hold my feet to the fire.
Right. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Wow. Yeah, I think that was a very good reflective question. I think that that's been a lot of experiences for me. Um, Not knowing how my voice needs to show up in spaces is more so towards the later part of my career has been the challenge. Not necessarily lost, but just how do I stay rooted in my identity? How do I stay rooted in my identity when the pressures from the communities that I am a part of seem to drown out, and it's been quite an experience trying to figure that piece out, and I'm still on that journey of trying to figure out what it means to stay rooted in my identity while at the same time holding space.
Well, being rooted it's interesting, right? Being grounded, being rooted, and trees, they're not just like rooted,
Hmm.
but underneath, like the ground, like the trees are being connected from their roots.
Hmm.
Like trees communicate underground through their roots to each other. It's a
Hmm.
whole underground sort of communication network, right?
Hmm.
So again, grounded or being rooted doesn't mean alone and shut down.
Hmm.
Rooted might mean I know where I stand. I know what I stand for,
Right.
right?
And I think for me, it's like being rooted doesn't mean that I'm not holding space for others, right? For those that really know me, if something comes to my doorstep, it's action. It's how way we ready to jump in, and um, is learning to balance that. Of I am rooted and I am here holding space does not mean that I need to pick up the gauntlet like and here take charge. It's and understanding how to show up and not be, I imagine what if the trees and the roots were codependent, like unhealthy. Our trees wouldn't be growing the way that they were. Like I think about that. Like as we think of what rooted looks like and staying grounded, imagine what those roots would look like if they carried the qualities and those, behaviors of codependency though. What would our trees look like? What would the grass, the trees trying to become the grass too, and the grass not being able to operate the right way around, like around the trees. Like it would be a catastrophe. So I think that what I know for myself is that I don't think it's as much of how I want to be seen. I think it's learning how to actually stand in solidarity and be in solidarity and what that means to be in solidarity. I don't think it's as much as being seen. I think it's the codependency piece. It's the saving. That's something that I know that I'm working through. But what does it really mean to be in solidarity? What does that look like?
It's, being seen as everybody else.
Mm.
It's being seen in the same way that every other tree in the forest is seen, but the forest needs the individuality of every single tree that's in the forest. That's what makes the forest lush.
Mm.
It's what makes it, sustainable.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
And plus, like you could, if you sit back and you read the room, you can see who wants to be seen, and you can see who's there in solidarity.
Mm. I think I do have one technique on how to really check my ego in those spaces. One is noticing the silence. That's huge to me, Henry. How do you check your ego? But I'm gonna tell you, man, and how I check the number one is when I notice that silence, and yes, reading the room and seeing the facial expressions, like that's a big. If I'm going and going, I'm like, there, that's not a silence to it. Maybe it's the energy thing because that energy from that silence, but it's not a silence like I'm really engaged. It's more like I've taken up too much space. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm sucked the air out of the room. So what are some things or one thing you can name where it's like, yo, to be able to determine am I showing up in my ego? Am I trying to be seen, or is this me really being in solidarity?
I mean, I can't help but to show up in my ego, right? And I don't know if like I don't think that's wrong, or I don't think that's bad,
Mm-hmm.
right? If I show up in my ego, like our ego is important because it keeps us right sized. Now there's like this inflated ego where I'm in here and I'm the expert and I'm better than everyone and I've this and that, and then there's the deflated ego. I'm on the ground. I'm less than. I'm no good. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Mm.
I can't. I'm unrelatable. But it's like it's okay to show up in places if your ego is in check. I mean, our identity,
Mm.
our personality, our beliefs, how we think, how we feel is all centered around our ego.
Mm.
It's when the ego gets left unchecked that it can really cause harm to myself, and it can really cause harm, to other people. But here's the trick. How am I breathing?
Mm.
And if I'm not breathing from a very natural, full state, then I'm somewhere else.
Yeah.
If I'm breathing rapid, if I'm breathing shallow, if I'm not, breathing at all, then I'm usually
Mm.
overwhelmed, or I'm anxious, or I'm ashamed, or I'm embarrassed, or I feel guilt, or I feel out of place. And none of that's true, right? None of that is true. My mind tells me, our minds tell us that is true. And coming back to the breath and using the breath to help me root and to help me ground, it will let all of those judgments and criticisms, it'll let it just melt away.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that's good.
check your breath, check the quality of your breath. That's the easiest way to see, how you're going to show up.
Yeah, you guys, Henry can tell when I'm not breathing. It's funny if you've seen us in the same space at the same time. You can see when he says breathe, he could tell that my breath has left my body. Hey, Maxwell, he jumped in, and breathing is very important. I'm referring to using a larger percentage of the default 20% of our lungs throughout the day. It is. I find that, and it's usually right on the mark when Henry recognizes, because he is reading the room and he is paying attention and sees that my breath is shallow. My anxiety, I'm in full force. My passion has surpassed and has now left my body almost. It's in space. So I would say that is absolutely a technique to start integrating in your life. Um, I'm breathing as we unpack this conversation because, again, these conversations are not easy in the sense they don't come with their own rhythm that throws us off. I know for me, my heart rate's been up and down through this, and I've been sitting and having to sit back and breathe through it. And I took a lot of advantage of even the technical difficulties and was breathing while Ryan was helping, because we're talking about things that come from a deep place inside. When I think about 2 weeks ago, and I don't know, I hear like noise on my end. Henry, do you hear noise? I hear noise on mine. I'm just having all kind of technical difficulties happening over here. But if you can't hear it, then I'm going to keep talking and get to this piece. But 2 weeks ago, it's upstairs. Okay. 2 weeks ago, as we were sitting with our guests, it's like a whisper. There's like I guess, vacuuming happening. Can you mute your mic? I guess Ryan is there, or because it is. That's okay. We'll keep going. I was thinking about how we were sitting with our guests, and my focus, Henry, at one point was, I don't want to take up no space. I'm gonna be honest. I was like, I don't want to take up no space. I just want them to be here and be completely in it. And I don't know how I felt. I think I tried too hard to pass the mic. Like, we have questions we were unpacking through this, and it's like, what does it look like to share the mic or pass it entirely? Henry, I think I go hot or cold. I think I'll be like, throw the mic, and then you take it away. And honestly, sometimes that can be like this to people. Like, wait a minute, why are you throwing it all the way at me like that? Like, I'm trying to figure out, why do I go so hot and cold? And I know our question says, have you ever been complicit in silencing someone else by showing up too loudly? But I feel like I show up and just throw. I'd be like, here you go. And I don't know if that's even fair. Not right or wrong, but more like, how do we balance that?
Yeah, and part of me says, I can't silence somebody that's not willing to silence themselves.
Mm,
But on a deeper level, it's always, or most of the time, it's about safety.
mm,
We feel unsafe internally. Now I know we're just having a conversation. There's really no threat, right? But the amygdala in the brain is telling me that it's pulling on the fire alarm, and it's saying, there's a threat. Someone's being,
mm,
someone's being too loud. Someone's being too verbose. Someone's being too animated. They're being too big. They're making it, all about themselves. And again, I like the word reciprocity or mutuality, because that's what we're doing here. Is we're trying to engage with people in a way that is a give and a receive.
Mm.
And it's about me being aware, not that I'm changing to conform. Don't be bold, play small. That's not what this is about. But being aware of, am I pretending? Am I acting?
Mm.
Am I showing up? Am I showing up big because I'm small, or am I wanting to be loud because I want to be heard? So
Right.
I got to know where I stand with people and
Yeah.
groups and communities, right?
Yeah. 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 I love that you even threw in showing up small.
Yeah.
It counts. It counts, when you walk in, and it sounds like we're looking at your intent. It goes back to checking the ego. It goes back to saying, okay, what's happening right here? Because am I just being inauthentic, period? And I do recall there being a situation where I I went in saying, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to be engaged. I'm going to let everybody. And honestly, it got to a point where it was unfair because the space needed a presence that I was bringing. And that was a checking moment. So that small piece is relative, and it is meaningful just as much as saying knowing when you're too loud, right? I think the part I would want to share, especially with folks who are watching this, who have privileges that are, when you walk into a space, your privileges are exposed on you, that people have assumptions of all your privileges because of how you walk into a space. It's how do we then practice accountability when we don't hit the mark? And I want to share, it happens a lot when you are doing this work first. I want to share that you're not going to always hit the mark. I don't know who needs to hear that, but I want to say that we have a lot of things happening right now in our society, and we have a lot of people wanting to do the good thing, right? Do the good work. I want to do this good thing. And sometimes even in our desire, we don't hit the mark. So how do we hold ourselves accountable to that? That's a real question. Henry, do you have anything that's coming up for you as you think about that accountability?
I got to know where my roots are.
Mm-hmm.
I can't be accountable to something if I'm not clear what it is.
Wow.
I got to know what my role or what my purpose is,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I think those are important to, check in. What's my intentions? What's my motives? What am I feeling? And going into the space with this sort of personal inquiry, personal reflection,
Mm.
I think is important. One thing I wanted to share too that I learned um, through a lot of the work that I've done is with people that have a privilege, and it could be any number of privileges in any number of places at any given time. That the non-target group, which will be the person or the group of privilege in that scenario, is it's suggested that they are never the first to talk and they are never the last one to talk. And so when we met 2 weeks ago, that was there in my mind. And as much as I wanted to say particularly after our first guest, because I have a bit of a real relationship with Ryan, Um, and I know that there was so much that I wanted to say at the end, but the truth is there was really nothing that I
Mm,
could say or that I needed to say that hadn't already been said. That would have been a real good example of how this kind of people pleasing
mm,
a privilege, can show up.
mhm,
You
mm.
know, right?
I
And
had some moments like that too. I just wanted to say I had moments exactly like that for different parts of our guests.
yeah,
I sat back like, whew.
because again, like I represent, so much, and there's a lot of times, like in the spaces I'm in, I will almost always get the first word, or I'll almost always make sure I also get the last word.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it might be appropriate, but most of the time, I'm not even aware that it's really happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've got this persona, I've got this version of myself that I have to keep up for you, you know. And so part of that is I have to play the game that I don't even know that I'm playing with other people in my life,
Mm,
and it's an unfair game. I
mm,
like the word reciprocity, mutuality, and I think another word that I just mentioned, the word fair, like it also has to be fair.
mm-hmm.
We all
Mm,
have that one friend where we show up and that one friend, they talking about themselves the whole time.
mm-hmm.
And it's like I really don't even want to see or talk to that person today because it seems to always, be about them. Well, that's not a fair relationship.
Right.
So if I need something, if I need to receive something, that person's generally not going to be who I'm going to go to. And like not only am I selling myself short, I'm selling that person short.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're that way with me, they're probably that way with most people in their life.
Mm,
And so that's the accountability. Hey, I notice when we get together, you sure do talk an awful lot about yourself and what you're doing. And I've been here for 20 minutes. You ain't even asked me how my day's been.
right. I think as you were sharing that, I was thinking for our audience, as you reflect on that with your relationships, I want to share a moment to embrace as you are showing up as an ally with that same thought process. Understanding that there are relationships in your life where that reciprocity needs to exist so you can balance those relationships. When you show up in this space with communities that you do not belong to, it's important that that rooted piece, you knowing your purpose for being in that space. So, what is Sharita really saying? What is Sharita saying is unfiltered? That would be the accountability of it's not about you right now. I imagine if me and Henry had this conversation during the time frame where our guests were engaged in the conversation with us, and we just start going, feels really good to be sitting here doing this great thing with them. Doesn't sound hard. Like, imagine us taking the space and saying, we're going to now unpack it right after holding space with our guests. That space was set up intentionally to allow our guests to speak on things that we are not experiencing and how they are experiencing the world. It then is up to us to be accountable to look at each other and say how this experience impacted us, where we want to go with this experience or don't want to go. It is now our time to acknowledge each other and how we showed up. So that question that Ryan brought up, what's the harm in expecting points for decency and how do we unlearn that? Listen, First of all, what's the harm in expecting points for decency? Should do something in the middle of your chest. The harm in expecting points for decency. There is no harm in me acknowledging how my friend showed up in the space and centered what he just experienced, saying, I wanted to say something, but I stepped back and is saying, great, that resonates with me because I experienced the same thing with every guest. I wanted to jump in and be like, yeah, and it wasn't time for that. There's nothing wrong with us acknowledging each other's presence in the space. And I will say, to expect points, to expect acknowledgement, to expect, we're going all the way back to rooted, Henry. Like, well, where are we really rooted when we're saying we're allies? The outcome or expecting some recognition and points. And I'm gonna be honest, there's been some things that have happened recently that in society where there was a lot of people expecting some points for showing up on a weekend to rally and disrupt. And it wasn't, the points weren't given out. So it's, what's the harm, Henry, in expecting points for decency? What could be the harm behind it?
I still get to come to the cookout, right? Look, I've been invited to so many cookouts. Hey. Plus, y'all know I love to eat grilled food.
Right.
And it's really interesting. Our first guest 2 weeks ago really gave me just some beautiful feedback about how I showed up. And this person, it was the first time that I met that person, and it was awkward for me, but I allowed myself to receive, and it felt really good. But I wasn't expecting any points. And that's the beautiful thing about, I'll say, life is when a watched pot never boils. When I'm expecting something in return because I say something or if I do something, it almost never materializes the way that I desire. But if I can show up and hold space and be as selfless as much as I can, and to keep my ego and these other parts, right sized, there's so many gifts that I get. Right? There's so many gifts, that I get. And the world that I live in, it starts with me and it ends with me. And that's nobody else's responsibility at the end of the day. See, there's times in our life when we have to roll with other people, our friends, our families, our colleagues, our community. And then there's times in our life when we have to travel the road alone. And it's in those moments that we really find out what we're made of. And so we have to spend time alone. We have to really check in with ourselves. We have to drown out the noise. And I keep saying the word half. I know that I'm kind of demanding this, but like if we want things to really get better, then we have to begin to start looking at ourselves in that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not just the product of this lifetime, but there's many things from my parents' lifetime before I was born, my grandparents, and my going all the way back that have in fact impacted my genetic makeup. And that's not my responsibility, but my responsibility is how do I transmute that in a way that can have the greatest impact on the people in my life. But you have to be willing to look in the mirror, not just Sharita on the days after we get our hair done after our birthday. You have to look in the mirror on the days when, damn, I need to get a haircut. Not me, but we have to look in the mirror even on those days when we don't necessarily like or agree with what we're seeing. Is it starts with me and it ends with me, and that is my responsibility.
Yeah, you took us right into our final reflective question, Henry. Like, yes, being an example, absolutely. Like, how do we show up when the community we're supporting doesn't clap for us or even critiques us? You took it right in such an organic way. Um, that's another very uncomfortable space to be in. Not necessarily the clap, but it's not not being there. um, and what I do tell people, I, I I don't show up for. It goes back to what I'm rooted in. I don't show up looking for a clap. Um, I don't show up looking for praise. I show up. Fred Hampton said it. I am the people. I love the people because I am the people. Um, how can I still be committed without being comfortable? Because my commitment is rooted in its selflessness. It's a selflessness filled with self. I'm involved. I'm connected. I'm connected to the pieces, even if it's not my story. I'm connected to liberation. Because that's really what it comes down to. And I think the misunderstanding sometimes is when we're actively engaged in harm reduction, in social justice, in equitable healthcare. When we're actively engaged in those things, the assumption can appear to be that we are responsible for others' liberation. I'm not responsible for your liberation. I have taken this space to be responsible with my gifts to create the access for people to gain their liberation. That's a rooted concept. So when we ask, how do we continue to show up? Why do we continue? How do we stay committed even when it's uncomfortable? That's my answer. What would yours be, Henry, including what you shared, but I guess
Yeah,
taking it deeper?
there are times when I show up and it's about me. There's times when I show up and I want to be seen.
Mm,
I want to be acknowledged.
mm,
And I think if I'm aware, as long as I'm aware of it, like that's okay. It's when I'm not aware of it and I'm showing up and I'm performing automatically the way that I have my whole entire life, that's when it can become problematic. But what I realize, I show up, and if no one claps for me in the room that I'm in, I know I can hear it. I can feel it. Somebody's out there clapping for me.
ancestors.
My mama,
Yeah.
my kids, like, and I could get to show up for them people,
Mm,
however I am. My wife has seen me at my worst, and she's seen me at my best, and in between. You know, but I don't let people get to see me at my worst or even the in between.
mm,
You know, and I don't have to play the games anymore. I make mistakes, right? I'm human and I can be awful sometimes, and all of that's okay because it's all one we're all in one big soup.
mm,
And there might be too much salt, there might be too much pepper, not enough, carrots. but it's still soup when we all come together, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, um, I'm thinking a lot about what we've talked about, today, and I think I went back to a conversation that we had, and again, you're my teacher, and I was like going in on you on a text message, right? And you're
Yeah.
thinking, you're like, well, which one was it? I was going in, and I even said, you're taking this personal,
Mm.
and you said, I'm not taking it personal. You said this, you said this ain't right.
Mhm.
I didn't respond. I sat in it, and I was like, okay, let me own this. And I just remember I just responded back and I said, Sharita, will you forgive me?
Mhm.
And you did your one of your emojis, and for me that was just like acknowledgement that, yo, I love you, dude, and I forgive you. Like, let's keep it moving. We ain't gonna stay here.
Right. Right.
The power of that word.
Mhm.
Will you forgive me?
That's it.
I show up, I'm wanting applause, and so I'm acting and I want to be seen, and it doesn't come off the way that I would generally like. And I'm in my car and I'm leaving and I'm being critical of myself. It's like, yo, can you forgive yourself?
Mm.
Can you forgive yourself? Right. And so that's like the beauty of what we're talking about here is it gives us an opportunity to like truly forgive and to truly let go so that we can be rooted together in solidarity, in our sameness, in our uniqueness, in our fullness, in our weakness together, right? As we shut up so that other people can speak up.
Mm. I love that. I really love that. Was the icing on the cake. You sealed that. You sealed that one, dude. Listen, forgiveness. Forgiveness. That's really I'm not gonna even say that's all it takes. It is. It is. We have a challenge for everyone, Henry.
What's that?
As as we go into closing out and thanking our wonderful guests for being here, but there's a challenge. We want you to over the next week think about one way you can show up without centering yourself. And would you still do it if nobody ever knew? One way. And that's different, right? Because that's one of those things that you're not gonna videotape it, you're not gonna send it in, and there's a prize. You're gonna watch that organic because what Henry talked about is that organic and that love of what we do. And when you said, my mama, I think about that. Man, you made me smile because I'm like, there are some claps that I'm sitting there like, yeah, I'm cheesing. My mama, my stepdad, who just shoots me a text. Hey, remember, don't tell him everything, right? Don't tell him everything. So it's like, yeah, I do. There are claps that actually happen, and that I go, yeah, and that might be the only. But and my babies, my son, my daughter sharing something that was said profound on a podcast we had, or sharing a news clip. I'm sitting there like, yeah, yes, it is that. And the forgiveness, like you just like razzle dazzle the ending of this. That just hope it set a fire through people to hear it and also lift some weight. It's a lot of weight to pick up, So that question, Ryan put that question up there for us. It's a challenge for all of us. One thing you can do to show up without centering yourself this week, and would you still do it if nobody ever knew? And you can let us know. You can hit us in our inbox. You can chat with us and talk about what that experience has been like for you. And if it was a struggle and how you handled the turmoil or whatever the tension is, the tension, that's what it is. If you handle how you handle the tension of doing that or showing up in that way. Do we want to say some reminders, Henry, about what's to come? We want to share our reminders as we prepare to close out.
Go ahead.
Okay, we're gonna again. Listen, challenge accepted. Well, Maxwell said challenge accepted. Maxwell, I'm gonna follow up with you and make sure though, because I know you too. But yes, we got our live recording coming up, you guys. Please show up in that space. We really want to connect with you on a deeper. We're gonna get deeper, and in person, it will be deeper. Okay, so show up in that space with us so that we can really continue this movement. What we're doing is not it's not the regular podcast. This ain't your normal podcast. This is a movement of radical love, of revolutionary work, right? So we want to start connecting with our viewers, our audience that has seen us virtually. Again, if you're coming in town that weekend, go ahead and come see us. Make that a part of bring who you're coming in town with. We want to enjoy engaging with you. We will be back here in 2 weeks on the 28th of April, and we're gonna have a few guests on to wrap up this month where we are talking about showing up. We started with our guests who are from different communities that we show up for in the works that we do. We unpack that heavy conversation today to demonstrate, like Maxwell said, we're showing an example of how you can unpack that, how uncomfortable it can be to center other people. And the next step is to bring in some of our partners, people who have privilege of working on policy, people who are doctors or over organizations, over the work that they do, who have the privilege of creating programs. So we're bringing people to the table to say, hey, we know you caught a little bit of our episodes, and put them to a challenge with us, right? A conversation. Henry, what you want to say? Anything?
I won't be here on the 28th.
Where will you be, Henry?
I will be in South America in Bogota, Colombia, speaking at the International Harm Reduction Conference on behalf of Kentucky Harm Reduction Coalition, talking about our wonderful partnership that we had between Omni Resources, University of Louisville Hospital, Anthem Medicaid of Kentucky, Vital Strategies, and Kentucky Harm Reduction Coalition, and how we leveraged these relationships to form the Harm Reduction Navigation of Care, and also launched our Health and Wellness Lounge, which is down on Brook Street. So
yes, you guys, this is important work to be recognized nationally, and for our organization, a grassroots organization right here in Louisville, Kentucky, to be able to represent and share and speak. So Henry's speaking in a session about the work that we're doing, that exposure.
Why does your voice change when you say Louisville, Kentucky? You ever notice that?
Yes, I do. Need a translator to come with. Maxwell want to translate to come with you. But yes, I changed my voice, you guys, because I practice saying where we are. Why do you put me on the spot like that? I know that I do it. I know that I do it a lot. But yes, I'm excited about this opportunity. Henry is going with colleagues, a board member, other folks from Kentucky. We're going to show up and represent what we're doing in harm reduction. There are a lot of people who do not understand this work. Most of our state does. Even a lot of our state leaders do understand. But nationally and internationally, there's a struggle, and harm reduction is being put in a position where they're trying to make us disappear. But that's not going to happen. We will continue to do this work, and them going internationally is a next level. This will be our first time doing something international like this. So I am excited about what seeds will be planted and what's coming up next. I am reading the room. As Henry said, I'm about to breathe. I don't think we have anything else to talk about.
I think that's it. Yeah, I think we're done. Thank you, sis. This was wonderful. This was
I
great.
enjoyed time with you guys and enjoyed your time. So we will see you when we get ready to be live.
See y'all in 2 weeks. Take care. Be safe.
See you guys.